Hi, this is Mrs. Erickson, and you are going to take notes on Chapter 3, Section 3 in your science textbook. That will be pages 91 through 97. But you need to have your binder open to pages 61 through 63 and a pencil because you're going to be taking notes through this video. So get ready, and here we go. On page 61, it starts out with main ideas. Blood is made up of 4 components, and then you have 4 columns that say detail. What you're going to put in those columns, you're going to label each column this. The first column is going to be labeled plasma. The second column, red blood cells. The third column, white blood cells. And the last one, platelets. Those are the 4 components of your blood. So when you cut yourself and that red stuff comes out, this is all the stuff coming out. It's red because look at what you have most of, red blood cells. And of course we don't see these individually because they're too small. You also have white blood cells. They're bigger but fewer of them. And then you have these little guys that look like raisins, platelets. And of course what makes it runny is the plasma. So here we go. The 4 main ideas for blood. So, under the first one you have plasma. I want you to add one thing to that. It's the liquid portion of the blood. And we'll go into a little bit of detail about that further on. And it's mostly made of water. Liquid portion of the blood that's mostly made of water. The second one, you should have red blood cells written in, and of course we're going to abbreviate that a lot, RBC. And what I want you to put there is red blood cells take up oxygen and deliver it to your cells. That's what you need to remember about red blood cells. That's why blood goes to our lungs. Our red blood cells pick up the oxygen. White blood cells, this is the third column, sometimes abbreviated as WBC, fights diseases. That's what you're going to put there. So these are the main ideas. And the last one is platelets. The main idea there is pieces of cells or cell fragments that help clot blood. So when you cut yourself, these guys come to your defense. So we're going to talk about these in the next page, 2 pages. So on page 62, number 1, what is the name of the liquid part of the blood? It is the plasma. Types of cells in your blood. So you have a concept map here, and they have red blood cells filled in, and the other types of cells in your blood is platelets and white blood cells. You don't include plasma here because plasma isn't cells, it's water, mostly water. What is plasma mostly made of? I just told you that. It's water, so that's number 3. But something you're maybe not aware of is the materials that plasma carries. What's in plasma? There's nutrients there. So your C6H12O6 is being carried in the plasma. Your hormones are being carried in your plasma. And waste, like carbon dioxide, is being carried in your plasma. So it's maybe not made of cells, but it has a lot of things to do. Number 5, what do red blood cells do for the body? Well, we already talked about how they carry oxygen, but we haven't really talked about how that happens. So that's number 6. How do they carry oxygen? It's called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is found on your red blood cells. It's a protein, so if you looked in a microscope, a really high-powered one, at a red blood cell, you would see proteins on there that we call hemoglobin. They're high in iron. And if you can picture this, your red blood cells having hemoglobin on them is like taking a Kleenex, which could be your hemoglobin, and a piece of tape. And if you've ever put tape on a Kleenex, it sticks really easily and doesn't come off. That's kind of the way hemoglobin and oxygen would be. So you've got tape around your red blood cells, and the Kleenex could be the oxygen that sticks to it when it goes to your lungs, and then it goes to your cells in the rest of your body and is delivered where needed. White blood cells. They have another job too. Yes, they fight diseases, but how are they different from a red blood cell? Other than they don't carry oxygen, they just fight diseases. But this is how they're different. White blood cells, you saw in that picture, there's not very many of them, so there's fewer of them. They're a lot bigger. And here's a big one. They have a nucleus. Now, I've taught you from day one that animal cells have a nucleus, and they do. Most of them do. Our red blood cells have a nucleus when they're being formed, but once they get put into the bloodstream, they lose that nucleus. So our red blood cells don't have a nucleus once they're mature, whereas white blood cells do. And white blood cells can live for years. And that's why you get immunizations. You get a shot that introduces a microorganism, a weakened form of it, and your white blood cells recognize it and kill it, and then those white blood cells, a few of them, stay in your body to remember that pathogen. So if you ever get it again, you won't get sick because your white blood cells that are already there will kill it and attack it. So they live. White blood cells live for a long time. Platelets, they are pieces of cells. That is true. Blood clot forms. This is what your platelets do. They produce something called fibrin and weave tiny fibers across your cut so that when the blood keeps running through it, it eventually catches stuff and forms a scab. And then you don't bleed anymore, and there's no chance of getting microorganisms in there. Number 11 on page 63, what is a blood transfusion? We talked about this today in class. The transfer of blood from one person to another is a blood transfusion. And we talked about this today. Why can't a person with blood type A safely receive a transfusion of blood type B? Because type A blood has anti-B clumping proteins, or what I called in class today, your army. So the B blood will clot when given to a type A recipient. So here's your type A recipient with these little yellow things. These are going to be your type A proteins. This is what you have in your plasma. This is the anti-B clumping. And so if B gets put into your blood, it's going to grab onto them and bring them together and clump them together. And that's not a good thing because then you can't get oxygen to your organs. RH factor, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because it has more to do with pregnancies than with blood transfusions. RH factor is another protein found on your red blood cells. So if you're considered RH positive, you have one or more of these RH markers or proteins. If you're RH negative, that means you don't have any of these RH markers. And if you're RH negative and you're pregnant, you want to ask your doctor about what to do. They're going to give you a shot so that if your baby is RH positive, there's no clotting going on. But as far as transfusions, we don't have to worry about that. How many blood types? We talked about that today. There's 4 blood types in the human race. Type O is considered the universal donor. Type AB is considered the universal receiver. 14 through 17 is matching. So today we said that type A blood has anti-B proteins, type B blood has anti-A proteins, and type AB blood has no markers in its plasma because it has both markers or proteins on its red blood cells. So it doesn't have to hate anybody. It will just take everybody. Whereas type O, this blood type doesn't have any markers, nothing on its blood surface. Therefore, it's got an army protecting it against these guys. So they're going to have anti-A and anti-B proteins in their plasma. But don't worry, because over half the population is type O blood. Get my screen here to fit a little bit better for you. And here's just another picture of how things work. If you are type A, blood, you have A markers, and then you would have the opposite, the anti-B in your plasma. So this says plasma, and it's a different shape. It's more pointy, whereas this one's more square. If you're type B blood, pointy, then in your plasma you would have the square anti-A. AB blood, you don't have anything in your plasma. Type O blood, you're going to have anti-A and anti-B in your plasma. You can't receive from anybody. A little bit about the lymphatic system. We're on to number 18 at the bottom of page 63, a network of vein-like vessels that returns fluid to the bloodstream. What is lymph? It's a fluid inside this separate network of vessels. It's a fluid that they call lymph, and it's mostly water. Lymph nodes filter lymph fluid, trapping bacteria and other microorganisms that cause diseases. So your lymphatic system has a lot of white blood cells in it, and it's doing its job. It's attacking viruses and bacteria that have attacked your cells in your body. And your lymph nodes filter that, trapping the bacteria and getting rid of them. And that is the end of your note taking. So review this and review your blood types and come to class ready to do a blood type lab.